One goddamn religion. Snake. Slithering out of the garden into the Quran. 1. Muddled message. It is a bad thing some say, I have forgotten a verse of the Quran. For truly, I was caused by Allah to forget it. So you must keep on reciting the Quran because it escapes faster than a runaway camel. Bukhari v6b 61 n 550. Goddamn religion is the best documented, most accurate, complete, chronological, and contextual presentation of Islam's 5 oldest and most reliable scriptural sources ever written. In these volumes, you will see Islam as Muhammad lived it. To reorder the Quran chronologically and set its surahs into the context of Muhammad's life, the 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion were composed using Tabari's Tariq history and Ibn Ishaq's Sirat Rasul Allah Life of the Messenger of Allah, along with al-Bukhari's and Muslims' topical hadith collections. There is no better way to evaluate Islam's formative years, understand the Quran, or know why jihadists kill. That said, this research does not paint an attractive picture. When the available evidence is evaluated thoroughly and systematically, the only rational conclusion is that Islam's lone voice was a ruthless terrorist, a relentless mass murderer, an accomplished thief, and a depraved slave trader. He was a serial rapist, misogynist, and pedophile, in addition to being an avowed liar. This may sound scandalous, but these facts are irrefutable. 2. If you are religious, and prefer faith to facts, you will not like the way this book was compiled. If you are a progressive, and prefer political platitudes, this relentless pursuit of evidence and reason will be lost on you. And while that substantially narrows the readership, there is no reason to waste one another's time. This book was written for moral, open-minded, and rational people who want to understand why Muslims commit the vast majority of terrorist attacks. And most especially, it is my gift to Israel, since Islam has declared war against God's people. I am going to tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, while also attempting to maintain a sense of morality and humor because the Islam of Muhammad, Allah, and the Quran is exceedingly dark and deadly, demented and demonic. I do not share this irrefutable conclusion with you frivolously. In the aftermath of the first edition, then entitled Prophet of Doom, Islam's terrorist dogma in Muhammad's own words, I received thousands of death threats. With this comprehensive augmentation of that work, I'll endure thousands more. The fact is, no one has ever been this brutally honest about Islam and survived. And yet, with the very existence of Israel and the Jewish people at stake, it is worth the effort and risk. All I ask of you is to read what I have discovered. However, there are limits to what can be known. While Goddamn Religion is focused upon what the 5 oldest Islamic sources reveal about Muhammad and the first Muslims, we have no idea whether anything recorded 1 to 2 centuries after the fact and predicated upon hearsay actually occurred. Islam's non-prophet and his followers were illiterate and uneducated, universally immoral, ignorant, and irrational, and their hearsay reports from that time prove it. Even the Quran was communicated this way, passing from mouth to ear over 4 generations without anyone being able to write it down. The notion that a perfect book, written by the pen in heaven before the universe was created, was given to Muhammad is ludicrous, and in complete discord with the evidence. As you are about to discover, the Quran is an insult to our intelligence. If it were not for the carnage it inspires, we'd simply laugh it out of existence. Nonetheless, although there were no credible witnesses nor any historians present at the place and time of Islam's genesis, Muslims believe and act upon what has been handed down orally between 610 and 632 CE. They have nothing better. All other sources are considerably less reliable, as are the conflicting opinions and propaganda of imams and Islamic apologists over the years. Therefore, while the citations and conclusions found in Goddamn Religion are derived from the oldest and most reliable sources, they are highly suspect, especially the Quran. It is the worst book ever written. It was shamelessly plagiarized as Allah's messenger paid rabbis to recite stories from the Babylonian Talmud, which he then twisted to suit his situation and agenda. The result is an ongoing temper tantrum, with non-prophet and ungod screaming at everyone while stamping their feet in the dust of Arabia. Within this vile text, there are no intelligent transitions or cogent conclusions. Even the grammar is deficient. The Quran is a word salad comprised of immoral and irrational rants, all tossed together with rhyme but without reason. You may be surprised to learn that no one knows for certain where these events initially occurred, other than it was not in the insignificant and isolated village of Mecca. None of the internal depictions are consistent with that location or topography, nor is the archaeology. And all of the earliest qiblas, depicting the direction of prayer, point to Petra, not Mecca. So, while that ancient religious town is a much better fit for the ensuing stories, since Muslims have been conditioned into believing that Muhammad IV grew up in Mecca and that the Kaaba was there, we will play along to some extent, aware that it was not true. Said another way, accurate intel on Muhammad and Allah, where he lived and was conceived, and what they said and did, is unknowable. However, it does not matter since religion is based upon faith, not facts, scriptures that are believed, and not histories that can be proven. This is actually good news because it makes Goddamn Religion irrefutable. The only way to challenge anything contained within these volumes is to discredit the oldest and most credible Islamic sources upon which it is based. However, should any of these Islamic citations be proven unreliable, then the basis of the faith disappears. And that, too, is a good thing since the Quran defines a good Muslim as a terrorist. You may also find the following insights relevant. When augmenting and updating the research I undertook 2 decades ago, I decided to change the name of the book from Prophet of Doom to Goddamn Religion. The subsequent volumes now bear the names, Snake, Satanic, Submission, Slaughter, and Sunnah and Shuritan. I did so because I have come to see religion as the greatest threat to human existence, its most beguiling and incapacitating. I have presented a composite rendering of the 66 most popular and esteemed translations of the Quran. You will find a parallel presentation of these Qurans at islamowaken.com. However, since it is readily apparent that no one seems to know what Allah was trying to convey, they differ appreciably. Therefore, the most responsible approach has been to present a consensus where possible and a more complete spectrum when interpretations are too varied to rely on a singular rendering. And in this regard, the most insightful approach to the Quranic text is to be literal, which can be accomplished using interlinears. The best of these is the 5 Quran word by word, with translations by Muhammad Taqiyuddin al-Hilali and Muhammad Muzzin Khan. Their collaborative effort has been afforded the seal of approval from the University of Medina and is published by the King Fahd Complex for printing of the Holy Quran, with 10 million copies produced annually. The world's most widely disseminated Quran is further enhanced by incorporating Sunnah from al-Tabari, Islam's earliest historian and Quran commentator. And while it provides the most accurate rendering, those who want to paint a revisionist picture of Islam prefer sanitized paraphrases. But the more they whitewash their version of Islam, the further it is from the only Islam that matters, that of Muhammad, Allah, the Quran, and Sunnah. Over the past 2 decades, 2 things have changed which affect what you are reading. First, after posting Prophet of Doom online and conducting 5,000 talk radio interviews to promote its findings, young Muslims were in a quandary. In the face of what I was sharing, that Islam is peaceful and jihad is a spiritual struggle, arguments were discredited. So, to make their religion appear acceptable, Muslims sanitized the text. They inserted Allah when the Quran read Ilah, Rabbi, Rahman, Allahu, and Allahi, to dispense with the realization that Allah was a come lately. Then they replaced terror with awe in hadith translations of Ruba terror to disassociate their prophet from Islamic terrorism. While they were at it, the Muslim Student Association at my alma mater did 2 additional things, one annoying, the other helpful. Since there was no consensus guiding the nomenclature of the hadith, they rearranged their sanitized renderings under a different numbering system, making it slightly more difficult to verify my claims apart from using an online search engine. Then to counter the accusation that students of the Quran were deprived of translation aids, especially in comparison to the tools available to study the 6 Hebrew text of the Torah, they began offering Arabic/English interlinears. These not only convey the words as they were originally written, they present a transliteration of the Arabic terms from which they are derived. By doing the latter, they laid the Quran open to attack because the more we know, the worse it gets. These tools, and there are now many of them, impugn Allah's credibility because they reveal in no uncertain terms that the text of the Quran is impoverished and delusional. Had I taken the easier path to goddamn religion, would have copied and pasted from one of a variety of translations and left it at that, giving the erroneous impression that this one version was correct. Knowing otherwise, I invested the time required to compile a rendering that was far more complete and accurate than could be derived from any one interlinear or translation alone. And especially now, with the benefit of comparative English/Arabic presentations, I can provide a more literal rendering while still retaining the credibility provided by the most respected Arabic linguists and scholars. This approach became essential when I began to notice the inappropriate introduction of Allah's name into surahs originally credited to a nameless Ilah God, Rabbi Lord, or Rahman during the first 10 years of Islam. The problem was exacerbated when Allahu the for him, Allahi the to him, and Allah the for her appeared thereafter. The reasons for the change in nomenclature to goddamn religion are many, including the fact that, after writing Prophet of Doom, I went on to compose a score of books disproving the Talmud and New Testament. That is 7 important because it demonstrates I am fair and hold all non-prophets to the same standard. This is also relevant because the Quran seeks to garner the credibility it otherwise lacks by including twisted variations of Talmud stories, claiming that by using them, the Quran confirms Yahowah's Torah guidance and the Christian Gospels, unaware that they are incompatible. I am among the few people who can prove that the texts of all 3 Abrahamic religions are untrue while upholding the Torah and prophets. Therefore, this contextual and chronological presentation of the Quran serves to denounce Christianity in Judaism, not just Islam. Moreover, as a surprise to many, Yahowah, the God of the Torah, Nabi, wa Mizmor teaching, prophets, and Psalms, despises every religion because they all lie about him. And since damn means to forsake and forego, God-damn religion is an accurate reflection of Yahowah's assessment of these deceitful and destructive, deadly and damning, doctrines. After writing Prophet of Doom in 2002, I became increasingly uncomfortable with the title because Muhammad was not a prophet and his day of doom was not sufficiently known to properly describe the resulting research. I had originally chosen it based upon the realization that Muhammad only made one attempt at being a prophet, which was to predict the timing of this day of doom. So, while his verbal rants in the Quran and Sunnah would plague the world, as a prediction, he got the timing wrong by 1,000 years. That said, Allah is transfixed by his predicted day of doom, also known as the day of judgment and resurrection. It represents the Islamic God's greatest achievement, fulfilling his promise to reanimate the decaying bones of everyone who has ever lived so that he can personally attend to their punishment in hell. And his 8 torments are gruesome and include scalding, burning, and mutilating humans forevermore. As stated previously, after completing the original book, I have written many more, most of which are devoted to drawing valid conclusions and insights from my translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The website YYV1C1 has been created to present these books free of charge. And while the site impugns Judaism and Christianity, unlike Muslims, the followers of those religions are not typically destructive, bestial, or deadly. However, since Muslims are easily enraged, and since they cannot refute anything stated within goddamn religion without discrediting their own scriptures, they resort to attacking in 2 ways. These include denial of service attacks to bring the website down while also issuing death threats against me. And since I do not want to undermine your access to far more important books at YYV1C1, I'm repositioning and augmenting what was Prophet of Doom as goddamn religion so that it does not bring undue attention or hostile attacks. As a result, this update has been designed and composed to be consistent with the other 30 books I have written for your benefit. Now for a confession. After the joy of being the first to discover many thousands of profound insights in the Torah and prophets, in addition to coming to understand Yahowah's covenant and invitations, while also gaining an appreciation for the lives and lyrics of the Messiah and Son of God, who is not the one the Quran or New Testament endorse, the last thing I wanted was to return to denouncing Islam. Muhammad was a deplorable individual, and the Quran is an appalling book. But after watching the world respond to the inhuman terrorist attacks perpetrated by enraged Muslims against innocent and defenseless Jewish women and children, I could not shirk my responsibility. I was not only compelled to explain what occurred, Yahowah would have it no other way. And the answer was to update and augment Prophet of Doom as goddamn religion. It, along with Yada Yahowah, provides the lone antidote for the toxin which motivates Muslims to immorally and ignorantly chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." And to some extent, it may quiet the progressives who foolishly coddle and support them. I am not naive. I realize that there is no hope for the overtly political on the right or left, or for the religious of any faith. No amount of evidence or reason, even from an unassailable source, can save them from themselves. The indoctrination runs too deep, especially for progressives, conspiratorialists, and Muslims, who are now the blight of the earth. While my animosity toward the venomous influence of Islam should be evident, the reason that I have also singled out progressives and besmirched them more frequently than others along the political spectrum is that they are considerably more influential and dangerous. They have become so pervasive in the media and within academia that they have indoctrinated generations to such an extent the youth of the Western world seldom think, preferring to recklessly parrot erroneous political platitudes in mass gatherings. And they are overwhelmingly anti-Semitic, hypocritically throwing their support behind a religion whose values oppose their own. My goal is to arm and embolden enough people with the truth to throttle the desires of Muslims and progressive anti-Semites. We can also hold them accountable for the carnage they incite. That is a worthy endeavor. Now for this word of advice. Come to know and understand Islam first and then engage by wielding words wisely. Do not resort to violence. Religions cannot be defeated with bullets or bombs. Stooping to their level only muddies the water and makes a bad situation worse. Therefore, the answer isn't to kill Muslims or assault progressives but, instead, to thwart them by countering what they believe using evidence and reason. They won't be able to process it, but you are not doing this for them. The truth will, instead, protect the innocent from them. So please, do not rush off ill-prepared. You will do more harm than good. Do not use the knowledge gleaned from this book until you understand Islam better than the jihadists and their sympathizers. Also, before criticizing Islam, come to know Yahowah and become part of his covenant family. By having done so, you will risk nothing and gain everything. Since it is obvious, I might as well say it. Islam is a caustic blend of regurgitated paganism and twisted Talmud stories. Muhammad, who claimed to be Allah's messenger, conceived his religion by stealing most of his material. He did so to satiate his lust for power, sex, and money. He was a rapist, pedophile, and terrorist. His religion is a deadly plague. And if you think these conclusions are shocking, wait until you see the evidence, because it is overwhelming and irrefutable. So that you are forearmed, the critics of this work will claim that goddamn religion is offensive, racist, hate-mongering, intolerant, and unnecessarily violent. I agree, but I didn't write those parts. They came directly from Islam's scriptures. If you don't like what Muhammad and Allah said, don't blame me. I'm just the messenger, a reporter, not a promoter. Having gone down this road 2 decades ago explained the motivation behind the Islamic suicide bombings on November 1, 1109, I am well versed on how the critics of these findings will respond. So, consider what follows: a preemptive strike, a systematic refutation of their thoughtless slogans, erroneous claims, hateful taunts, and hollow laments over alleged victimization. Over the past 20 years, Islamic apologists have postured the notion of cherry-picking, of selecting the worst of Islam to render an unfair verdict. That, of course, is implausible, considering the length of these volumes and the breadth of material they present. I leave no stone unturned. If I have erred, it is by providing too much evidence, not too little. While it is a common refrain, the accusation that the Islamic scriptures were taken out of context to smear Muhammad and Allah is similarly incredulous. Over the course of the next 3,000 pages, I will quote from every surah in the Quran, and the vast majority will be presented in their entirety. But more than this, I put each verse into the context of Muhammad's life, quoting vociferously from the Sunnah as recorded by Bukhari, Muslim, Ishaq, and Tabari, Islam's earliest and most trusted sources. I even arrange all of this material chronologically. Muslims, and the progressives who support them, resort to ad hominem attacks and brutal threats because there is no informed or rational way to refute the evidence or conclusions presented throughout goddamn religion. The sources cited are their most trusted translations of the earliest witnesses to the Quran and Sunnah, which collectively comprise Islam. And so, while individual Muslims may differ, Muhammad and Allah are as they painted themselves in their own words. Although to be completely forthright, as you will discover, very little distinguishes Muhammad from Allah. They are similarly deceptive, egotistical, demented, and psychotic, a pair of intertwined serpents who chose Terror 12 as their preferred tactic. One sought acclaim and the other to be worshipped as God. I understand that this assessment may seem shocking since I'm disparaging the perceived God and acclaimed prophet of the world's second largest religion. But rest assured, some 700 pages into this initial volume, after you have listened to their confessions, I will superimpose over them the symptoms of their psychosis. Having received countless thousands of emails from irate Muslims, I am often called Islamophobic. However, that is senseless in that it takes courage to expose and condemn a religion this prone to violence. For 1,000 valid reasons, I am opposed to Islam, not afraid of it. This will become overwhelmingly obvious, as will my rationale. I have been accused of being a profiteer, I suppose, for having exposed an extortionist. And yet, Prophet of Doom has been offered free online since it was written 20 years ago. The same is true today with goddamn religion. I do not profit from the online or printed volumes and do not accept donations. I am typically called Jewish, but my DNA says otherwise. My mother's marital status is often called into question by the stalwarts of Islam, but I know better, and she has nothing to do with this. Although I have consistently relied upon 66 popular and respected translations and interlinears of the Quran, some say that Allah's book is only understood by those who speak Arabic. Unknown to them, however, the Arabic alphabet is actually based upon Hebrew, as is the case with every significant word in the Quran, including Quran to read and recite and Allah to curse and lament. While Muslims are beguiled into believing that the Quran is the word of God as the pen wrote it at Allah's command before the universe was created, the writing 13 quality is so deficient it is anyone's guess as to what Allah was trying to say. As evidence of this, translations are not only radically divergent, they are incomprehensible without the translator's additions and explanations, which are inserted within parentheticals. If you are rational, I'm confident that you will concur. Several years after publishing Prophet of Doom, successfully promoting it on thousands of syndicated talk radio programs, surviving an international boycott, the hacking of the prophetofdoom.net website, a fatwa against my life, and countless death threats, an enterprising Muslim came up with an innovative approach. He changed Muhammad's citations as they were collected by Imam Bukhari in the true traditions and then translated by Muzzin Khan. While he couldn't, of course, copy-edit Muhammad in the original collection, or in the 1971 printed version published by Maktaba Dar es Salaam, he was able to alter the only online presentation. It was hosted by my alma mater, the University of Southern California's Muslim Student Association, MSA. I used it to catalog the citations because it was well organized and, since it was online, Muhammad's words could be validated without having to purchase the printed version of the collection which was numbered differently. This savvy Muslim's first alteration was the hadith I cited most often since it was succinct and suitable for radio audiences. Using the MSA's nomenclature, it was Bukhari, Volume 4, Book 52, Number 220, I have been made victorious with terror, from RUBA. He changed Muhammad's declaration from terror to awe, doing the same throughout the entire online collection. And when the USC MSA digital database was replicated by other universities in support of their flourishing MSA programs, Muslims were afforded a new tactic. They could alter the translations of Muhammad's most inflammatory testimony and claim I had cited it incorrectly. However, had they been 14 scholars, not zealots, they would have validated my citation by considering the use of RUBA terror in the Quran. For example, Allah says in Quran 3.150, and we will cast terror, RUBA, into the hearts of the disbelievers. After a while, this approach became a feeding frenzy. Muslim apologists began using the highly sanitized Ahmed Ali paraphrase, Al-Quran, contemporary translation, to counter my preference for a more literal and accurate rendering. Nonetheless, since the most verbatim, esteemed, trusted, popular, expressive, and expansive reading is found in the Noble Quran, copyright Maktaba Dar es Salaam, King Fahad National Library, translated by Muhammad Muzzin Khan, my composite presentations favor it along with the more exacting Quran word-by-word interlinear. And should you be seeking verification, consider the 66 English translations of the Quran presented in parallel at islamawakened.com. The weakest arguments that will be brought against the evidence and conclusions presented throughout these 5 volumes are that a religion this popular cannot be this bad and that since most Muslims aren't terrorists, I must be mistaken. However, throughout history, the majority has seldom been right, and most terrorists are Muslims. Furthermore, the notion of judging a religion based upon a summary appraisal of its adherents isn't rational, while presenting its scriptures is irrefutable. Predicting what he called the Day of Doom, often called Judgment Day, or the Day of Resurrection, was the non-prophets and ungods' most repeated attempt at prophecy. While it did not occur in 1100 CE as they foretold, it nonetheless came true. Muslims and infidels alike have been doomed by Islam since its inception. That notwithstanding, to be accurate, we must acknowledge that while Muhammad is called a prophet by Muslims, even the Quran often concedes that he had no 15 prophetic credentials. More importantly, as we progress, we will apply Yahowah's Torah standard to conclusively prove this point. Other than to have pilfered a collection of characters, all of whom were misappropriated and misrepresented in the Quran, Muhammad shares nothing in common with Abraham, Moses, Daud, or Yahshua. The most common argument which will be deployed against goddamn religion is to suggest that Islam and the Quran are no worse than Christianity and the Bible. And while that is not true, even if it were, the comparison would not negate any of my findings. Wrong is wrong, even when many things are wrong. To this point, I am the only person on the planet who has also written volumes systematically proving that the Christian New Testament and Rabbinical Talmud are invalid. So, while they are all rotten, the Quran is much worse than the others. It is why there are few Christian or Jewish terrorists, while jihadists number in the millions. After replying to tens of thousands of emails received from Muslims in the years following Prophet of Doom, I stopped responding 15 years ago. Far too many came with death threats, and most were rife with profanity. They all lacked a cogent argument against the evidence I garnered from the Islamic sources. Not even the Islamic scholars I debated over the years could refute what I had written. The apologists tossed word salads of logical fallacies and emotional appeals, which were effective among the religious as well as progressives. I suspect, however, that reactions to goddamn religion will be more polarizing because the world has changed appreciably. October 7, 2023 was far more sadistic than the suicide bombings of September 11, 2001, and the response these attacks has reflected that difference, with the intent of the demonstrations now being the annihilation of Jews and the elimination of Israel. 16 Therefore, I will encounter a more receptive audience among Jews and a more hostile response from Muslims, progressives, and conspiratorial right-wing wackos, although I understand this isn't a technical term. Recognizing that goddamn religion is critical of Judaism and Christianity in addition to Islam while being dismissive of vocal anti-Semitic progressives, the audience has been considerably thinned. And that is by intent. I am pursuing the truth on behalf of God's people, and I am not soliciting collaborators or followers. I serve Yahowah, the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Jacob, of Moses and Daud, of Yisrael and Yehudim, which is why I share his testimony throughout this volume. This will annoy the religious and be uncomfortable for atheists and agnostics. But it is necessary because Allah claims to be the God of the Torah, using the correct spelling of Torah, while at the same time contradicting God's teaching and guidance. Be forewarned, since the motivation for the inhumanity perpetrated by Muslims raiding Israel found within the Quran and Sunnah are very dark and twisted, demented and demonic, I use sarcasm to lighten the mood. However, humorous cynicism is a dying art and requires an intelligent and moral audience, a rare commodity today. The reason that I have returned to represent Prophet of Doom as goddamn religion is predicated upon what occurred in Israel on October 7, 2023. I watched Islam in action. Israeli babies were targeted and decapitated. Children were set on fire. Jewish women were not only gang raped, their genitals were mutilated during the attacks. The bellies of pregnant women were sliced open. And after killing 1,200 Jews, 240 more were tortured and then paraded before applauding crowds as trophies. That was bad, but not the worst of it. I watched as the world reacted in favor of the terrorists and against their 17 victims. Large and boisterous crowds inverted reality. I'm here to hold them accountable. Therefore, since I knew that the barbaric savagery on display on July 10, 23 was the result of Islam, as had been the case with the suicide bombings of November 9, 01, and since it was apparent that Hamas and Al-Qaeda were symptoms of this plague, while the world celebrated this inhuman attack, I realized the truth must be told. There is something else you should know. While the 5 volumes comprising goddamn religion sit boldly on the shelf at www.yadaya.com, they represent only 5 of more than 30 books I have written over a score of years. And there is nothing remotely comparable to any of them. I say this because, while there have been many who have attempted to translate the Bible, most have focused on the New Testament as opposed to the Hebrew text. As the first of its kind, I have produced an amplified translation of Yahowah's testimony, an approach I invented to enhance understanding and encourage investigation. This is accomplished by sharing a Hebrew transliteration of the words the prophets wrote, along with a more complete assessment of each term's meaning. The translations presented within Yada Yahowah are key to reflect the Dead Sea Scrolls and are accompanied by explanations, insights, and conclusions. Unique among them is that God disdains Judaism in addition to Christianity and Islam. He is also apolitical. There have been thousands of commentaries, but only one accompanies an original translation. As a result, I have been afforded thousands of unique insights into the Word of God, including the proper pronunciation of Yahowah's 18, YHOWH, name. I am the first to present and explain the 5 conditions and 5 benefits of the covenant as well as the first to correctly date and elucidate the purpose of Yahowah's 7 annual invitations. As a result of Yada Yahowah, readers recognize when the first 4 micro-EY invitations to meet were fulfilled and when the final 3 will be celebrated, in addition to gaining an appreciation of how they complement the Berith covenant family. Yada Yahowah is unparalleled in proving that there are 3 destinations awaiting human souls, not just heaven or hell. Nowhere else will you find that Torah means teaching and guidance, instruction and direction, not law, or that there is no Hebrew word for obey. These books focus on God's disdain for faith in favor of knowing. For the first time in 3 millennia, David is presented as the Son of God, his firstborn, our Messiah and King, in addition to the realization that he served as the Zerah sacrificial lamb. I have demonstrated that every prophecy hijacked by Christians for their Christ correctly applies to Yahowah's chosen one. 4 volumes demonstrate that the entirety of the Christian New Testament is untrue, that Paul was the plague of death, and that Jesus Christ was an ill-advised religious replacement for the genuine article, David. He is the Son of God and Messiah who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, and Shabuah in 33 CE/year 4000 Yah. He, as Yisrael's king, is returning to reconcile Yehudim with Yahowah on Yom Kippurim at sunset in Jerusalem, October 2, 2033. Therefore, time is of the essence. A great deal will occur between now and this family reunion, much of it horrific, and God wants you to be prepared. As a surprise to many, there are actually hundreds of prophecies pertaining to this mission heralding Daud's return while calling Yahowah's people home. The many 19,000s of insights provided would have been unachievable without the Ruach Spirit's contributions. For example, consider the fact that Psalm 22 has been available for 3,000 years, and yet, in all of that time, no one recognized something that should have been obvious to everyone. It was scribed in first person by Daud because he personally endured Passover and unyeasted bread resulting in firstfruits on behalf of his people. This realization became evident when translating the first 30 Mizmor Psalms for coming home. The prophet articulated why he volunteered, and shared the reasons God allowed him to serve Yisrael in this manner. As a result, the process Yahowah deployed for his son to save us became evident. Collectively, these insights regarding who Daud is, what he has done, and what he will soon accomplish represent the single most important discovery pursuant to God and life with him in millennia. There have been others who have made great strides in properly assessing Muhammad, Allah, the Quran, Hadith, and Islam, but nothing is comparable to goddamn religion. Even the strategy of reordering the Quran chronologically and setting it into the context of Muhammad's life through the historical and biographical portraits painted by the oldest Islamic resources, is without precedent. Moreover, few have held the inventors of Islam accountable by comparing their nonsense to the testimony they plagiarized and bastardized. And no one has dared to impugn the motives of the perpetrators. That said, my pejorative and mocking tone, even my unbridled confidence, will upset and offend some. Nonetheless, it is Yahowah's preference. It is the approach Elijah will bring when he arrives on Passover in 2030 along with a modern-day witness who will eviscerate religious and political advocates. If you are offended by this condescending approach, then you won't like Elijah any better than this book, and he will soon be humanity's 20 best and last hope. Muhammad and Allah, the Quran and Sunnah, are repulsive. And I'm not afraid to tell you so. As we consider the vulgar nature of Muhammad and Allah, I hope you come to value righteous indignation to protect the victims of rape and pedophilia, mass murder and mutilation, sadistic terrorism, misogyny, and racism. And when such things are motivated and celebrated as a result of the testimony of Islam's snakes, a demented psychopath and demonic megalomaniac pretending to be prophet and God, it is essential that we display the compassion and courage needed to expose and condemn them on behalf of the innocent they would otherwise abuse. Muslims have been played for fools. And while that is not easily resolved, Jews must know that Allah defines a good Muslim as a terrorist. They cannot accommodate them. Instead, they must protect themselves from them. A year before it occurred, I predicted what transpired in Israel on October 7, 2023, providing a written and oral record of my warning, explaining in great detail how it all would play out. And now, I am not only revealing the consequence of Israel's belated and counterproductive response but also stating that there will be a second phase, and the next one will be 100-fold more extreme. 22 years ago, to prevent this from occurring, I explained how the onslaught of Islamic terrorism could be avoided without firing a shot, without killing anyone, without anyone else dying. 2 decades later, since the world did not listen, 2 of those 3 resolutions are no longer applicable. Too much damage has been done in the interim. But the third is capable of changing the world and saving lives. By methodically and irrefutably excoriating Islam, we can protect God's people. Continue reading.